Yeah, and let's welcome Anita, who is a programmer and a psychologist. So, nice combination.
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm here. Hello, everyone. So let me start. Perhaps you all heard about 5 stages of grief. It's a pretty handy model, it's commonly known, and it goes pretty much like this. At first, there is a denial, then it's followed by anger, then usually there is a phase of bargaining. It goes smoothly to the depression phase or just sadness and ends with acceptance of the new situation. And why I even talk about this? Because we all go through losses basically every single day. And if you're surprised with this information now, let's think about something that might happen to any of us on any given week, let's say. Imagine you wake up on a Saturday morning, very late morning, around noon, and you realize that in 2 hours, you need to be at a family lunch. And this family lunch is actually your mom's birthday party. And you forgot to buy her a gift. So you have 2 hours to actually make it work. So you rush from home, you get into your car, you go to the nearest shopping center. And it's a Saturday, early afternoon, so obviously it's super packed. You cannot find any parking spot. You go around, and you pretty much, at first, your reaction probably would be like, no, 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 it cannot be happening to me. I really need to do it. Denial. Then you very quickly probably would get super angry. Why these stupid people need to be here now? Like, I really need to go there. Then you start bargaining. Maybe if I go around a couple of times, someone would leave and I can find my parking spot. Usually, it never happens, so you just enter the sadness and depression mode with some catastrophic thoughts. I'm going to be late, my mom is going to hate me, I'm such a disaster in life. But a few moments pass, and you just accept the situation. Perhaps you leave the parking place, go outside, and it's like, okay, I will just walk this extra 200 meters, and I will be 10 minutes late, no biggie. Because you see, a loss doesn't have to be physical. A loss is actually anything. It can be a loss of something pleasant that you planned. It can be anything that you anticipated. It can be a loss of opportunity. It can be a loss of comfort. And every single time we go through any sort of loss, we go through all of the cycles. They can last just a second, but sometimes they last much longer. So think about something that you probably all do daily or at least weekly. Code reviews. And the code review that you're requested to do looks like this. What are your thoughts? What's your thinking process when you see something like that? That's one of the answers, but before you do that, wouldn't you go through all the stages of like, no, 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 I really don't want to do that. Why people even do that to me? And then you accept it, and at the end it can be, yeah, LGTB, yeah, happens. And during the process, let's say you want to do it right, you perhaps even go through the cycle of denial, aggression, sadness over and over again until you get it done. And it's an emotional roller coaster, and it always happens. And how about when you're requested to build a new feature? You see a feature requirement, and you pretty much are in a panic mode. And for the product person, it's like, how hard can it be? It's just a button. And again, you pretty much would go through similar phases because this is a loss of comfort. And comfort is very important for us. We build these boxes of comfort, and this is very good for us because once we build it, we can automate certain behaviors, certain processes. Pretty much everything is known to us. It means comfort. And getting out of this comfort zone, well, is uncomfortable. But because of this comfort and automation of the other things, you can focus on what actually matters, what's important. And for 99, maybe even 100% programmers, the most important thing is writing clean code. Code is the most important thing, right? But our work is not about code. So do you have any ideas what our work could actually be about? You're close. Any other ideas? Speak up. Yes, you're very, very close as well. Our work is actually about bringing business value. And business value, almost 100% of the time, equals bringing money. And as depressing as it might sound to some of you, nobody cares about code or tech in business. Absolutely nobody. They want to solve problems. And we live in a dynamic world, and for companies it means that they need to adapt to things very, very quickly. They need to ship features to maintain current users. They need to improve the features to actually attract new ones, for example. Business needs to adapt constantly. Sometimes not only based on features, but for example, there needs to be like a pivot in the business model. Sometimes it means that entire application or set of applications needs to be completely scraped. Removed, we start something new. And sometimes because of that, we are asked to deliver things just like fast and dirty. And then iterate over that, adding this complexity of features, and then again, scrape everything and perhaps start from scratch. That's just life. Everything happens in cycles. And it can be super demotivating because every single time this happens, it breaks our comfort box. But let's get back to the code. We usually don't feel this much emotional roller coaster or such resistance when it comes to refactoring code. This is pretty regular task for us. We iterate over things, we refactor, we apply any patterns, beautiful things. People get excited, like programmers get excited about these kind of things. And we even refactor our own code over time, seeing that how things could be done better now. Because we got more knowledge, we got more experience, we just know better now. And usually we see it as an opportunity to grow. We are not denying that needs to happen. And then why business changes are so scary to us if you are so used to getting and working in cycles? I think there are a few reasons. The first one is that there is difference of scale and time invested over this. So when you think about finding a parking spot, you are investing in this for like a minute or two, so you also forgot relatively quickly about this roller coaster. Every single stage just lasted for a few seconds, maybe minutes, tops. When we iterate over code, then again, the cycle maybe is not that long. But if you're invested in a project that you were just like building over and over and over as a whole for a year or two or maybe more, this is a very different attachment that you got to it. This is your comfort box. You know everything, ins and outs of this project. Then there is our personal differences, because we all are different as humans, and it's based on our temperament and character. Some of us might adapt to changes super quickly. Nothing really matters. I'm easy. I will just go with whatever happens. Some might get more difficulties getting used to that. And bad news is, as I mentioned, this is our temperament character, so it means it's mainly biological. There is not really that much we can do about it. We need to deal with it. However, a big chunk of this, which comes with our character, is behavioral, which means it can be exercised. If we go over and over similar situations, we get used to them way quicker. Yeah. So let's get back to this griefing model again. Why do I even talk about this? This model was created in 1969 by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and it was created based on working with patients dealing with terminal illnesses. Later on, it was reviewed, and some more elements were added. It was a base to create then a change curve. It's a model that's used to use to explain a typical response of people to a change in an organization. Because absolutely each change, even the best one, means losing something. And because each loss means that we need to adapt to the new situation. This is how this model looks like. At first, there is shock followed by a denial. This looks around the same. Then there is anger phase, usually as a frustration, followed by uncertainty and confusion. The main difference is what happens after. People start dealing with their situation and perhaps start to experiment. They need to see what this change actually means to them. If the experiment goes relatively well, they say, okay, I decide to go with it, and then they usually integrate this new situation and carry on. Please note an important detail here, how it affects motivation over time. This is time, and this is motivation. It drops, but then it rises again. And note number 2, the lines start before the graph, and I did something funny. Okay, we are back. Yes. So the line starts over here and ends outside of the slide. What does it actually mean? It means that it's a never-ending process. We finish at one stage, and then we start again. It may be years, it may be days, but we will go and we will start with a certain level of motivation over time. And because all of this happens over and over again in cycles, there's an alternative title to my talk. Eat, sleep, chaos, repeat. Everything happens like that. Sometimes less or more chaotic, but it happens in cycles. And perhaps now is a good time to give you a bit more context why I talk to you about these things. As it was already mentioned, I started in IT like 10 years ago. For like around 8 years, I used to work as a backender. Then 2 years ago, I joined a company called Job and Talent. And after a year, I decided to go into the managerial path. So now I'm an engineering manager, and I currently manage 2 teams. I also started a master's degree in psychology like 3 years ago, and I'm about to finish it this semester, so please keep your fingers crossed for a master thesis. And what I'm about to show you more here is pretty much based on my experience guiding my team. And to give you some context about what we are dealing with, as I mentioned, I started as a programmer, and then I actually was a team lead and then engineering manager of 2 teams. It means that over the 2 years, the company went through a lot of changes and a lot of crucial projects. To give you context, the revenue of the company is like 2.5 billion euros a year. It's a massive scale, and there's a lot of business everywhere affecting everything we do. And let me state it this way. Tech is easy, tech is predictable, and tech is very rational. This is really the easy part. But tech is built by people, and people are not easy at all. People are very often not predictable, and people are definitely not rational. We all are different, perhaps as different as all the Sesame Street characters, but we all go through the same things, like in the grief model, but we just react to the things differently. We are driven by biology, and it can spark chaos, a lot of chaos. But getting back to this change curve, this is the original one. Please note that if we start from a high note regarding our motivation, even at the lowest point when the change happens, we still have room to continue and be relatively enthusiastic about what we do, about work, company, project, you name it. No issues here whatsoever. But this typically happens when we start at a new organization, at a new job. And it's very much like starting a new relationship, romantic relationship. We are hyped, everything is amazing, our new partner is amazing, life is wonderful, world is beautiful. No doubts here. But when we already are a bit stagnated, our lowest point can lead to nothing for a moment, because our motivation can be almost at zero for a moment. And until we get over this yellow tipping point of confusion and uncertainty and get into this integration, raising our motivation again, we are in this state of nothingness. That's quite unpleasant. But what if it doesn't happen? What if we are sort of stuck in the yellow bubble, or if we don't have enough time to have our motivation go up again? because, again, if we make it happen, we have our motivation up there, we start building our comfort box. We can put like our furniture there and like make it a home. But what happens when another change, another big change that affects us happens again before we do that? We pretty much start at a very low point, and our motivation at the lowest can be negative. So we are distractors. We are not motivated at all. We are not productive. We don't know what's happening to us, everyone around us, and we really don't like it. And it feels really shitty. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is a very bad and very unpleasant emotional state. And on top of that, we are not productive, so we don't have this constant kicks of dopamine in our brains when we actually achieve something, even small. And dopamine is a very, very nice hormone that makes us feel like kings and queens of the world. It's this amazing feeling that when you actually find this annoying bug that was bugging you all day long, you fix it, and then you're like, I did it. I'm amazing. Everything is great again. For a minute or 5, maybe an hour, but it's important for our brains to get it regularly. And in this scenario, there's none of that. And unfortunately, I was there. My internal motivation was basically non-existent. I felt really confused and powerless. I also saw that people in my team were affected by the changes around. I felt very responsible for them, so I decided to do what any psychology nerd would do, which is research. I started looking into a lot of papers and books regarding motivation, teams, changes, anything that really could help me understand what we are going through and how perhaps to make it better. A big part of it was this change curve that I already showed you, and acknowledging the fact that this curve is normal. We feel these emotions, and this is absolutely normal. Everyone goes through that. It can be sometimes longer or shorter, people go at it in a different pace, but everyone goes through the stages. And I know that to a rational brain, it might sound like a new age nonsense to you, but acknowledging an emotion, like really agreeing with it and just noticing like, I see you, you're here, welcome, really makes it disappear way faster, way, way faster. Okay, so we know what we feel, that it's on a curve and that this is normal. We might even start feeling better because of acknowledging that. What's next? And then there's Lipit-Noster model for managing complex change to the rescue. According to this model, there are 5 elements needed to go seamlessly through a complex change at organization. Meaning, this change curve can be flatter, much flatter, meaning less unpleasant. So there is vision, there's skills, there is motivation, resources, and an action plan. Ta-da, done, right? We successfully delivered a really big project in a very changing environment. Obviously, the model doesn't help by itself, but its authors actually made a really good thing with this. They created a matrix of emotions that correspond to each missing element in this model. So when there is no vision, people usually feel confused. When there is no skills or not enough skills, there is anxiety. When there is no motivation, there's a lot of resistance. When there is not enough resources, we feel frustrated. And if there's no action plan, it leads to a false start. Not really an emotion, but I will get to that. And the original matrix looks like this. And please note that this can be read as a mathematical equation. And the missing element can be an X. That means that we can, based on the emotion we experience, we can get the missing element and name it. Because of that, we can understand what's missing and fix it. So you can be a very big help to yourself and to your colleagues and pretty much everyone around involved in a project by naming what you feel. Name it, seriously, don't be afraid of it. Because once you identify it, you can fix it. So let's say you're confused. It means that you either don't understand the vision or you don't know the vision. At this stage, it's crucial to ask questions. You probably are not the one who can answer them, but there should be people around you who can. any sort of manager at this situation should be your person to go. It could be your direct manager, it can be a product manager. Just start asking around. This is very important for everyone to understand why we are doing things. Because as a dev, you're not only entitled to ask questions to business, you're encouraged to. Because answering these questions is also an excellent way to show others where are the issues. Maybe show blind spot, maybe show like something is missing really. And by asking questions, you can also support your colleagues, because all of us probably were in a situation that there's like something new being presented, and there's like, are there any questions? Silence, silence, nobody speaks up. And then one person asks a question or shares something, and then a full conversation starts. This is what happens when people start speaking up. Just one person is needed to start this. And to start this domino effect that can actually bring a positive change to everyone around in your team. When you feel anxious, you probably don't have enough skills, or you don't feel like you have enough skills. And please mind that an imposter syndrome is a real thing. It might be not about your skills, it might be about your confidence. Statistically, more women experience that, but I also saw men in that position. So be mindful of that. Perhaps it's best to ask for feedback from your colleagues. Usually there is no issues there. So either way, the best thing to do again is communicate your things. Because on top of, let's say you really don't know something, you miss a very specific important skill. It's oddly comforting for everyone around in a difficult situation for someone to speak up and say, I don't know. I don't know how to do it. And if you're a junior developer, this is sort of expected. Nobody would even blink an eye. But if you're a senior, you might think this is actually going to ruin your reputation. Actually, usually the opposite happens. The more senior you are, the more respect and kind of like street cred you can get by saying this. Because there is no single person in this world that knows everything, and we instinctively know that, but we rarely get reminders of it. It's a matter of an ego. Saying I don't know, the more senior you are, the more comfort you can actually bring to the team. And remember, done is better than perfect. Even if you don't have like 100% of a skill, but you know how to sort of deliver it, that's usually good enough. Don't overthink it. And regarding motivation and the resistance that comes with lack of it, this is an interesting one, because according to this curve of change, let's say you're already at a very low motivation point. But there are two types of motivation. One is internal and the other one is external. Internal one is this great sweet spot for us to be. We just do things because they feel amazing and we really want to do them. No questions asked, we just do it for ourselves. But the external one needs some incentives, like, for example, money, prestige, cookies and nice coffee, I don't know, whatever works for you. And direct external incentives are pretty rare in our work, because we don't get a bonus when a project gets finished on time. That's usually how it goes. And we sort of need that. We can hack our brains, actually. We can create our external incentives for ourselves and get reminded of them every single day. Because of that, we can spark our dopamine kicks in our brain and actually start feeling more motivated internally because of that. But you need to create that incentives list for yourself. And such a list of incentives is best to write it on using pen and paper. There are a lot of studies showing that handwriting versus typing actually uses very different parts of our brain. Handwriting is great for sparking creativity, problem solving, and it actually increases our memory. So it's best to use pen and paper, maybe on a sticky note, post it, put it on your screen, and look at it every single day. And your incentives might be very big. Like, for example, if we finish this project, there will be less support requests, so I will less spend time answering questions to these annoying people who just keep asking the same thing, or, I don't know how to use anything. Or it can be, if I learn this new technology, then perhaps I can be promoted to an architect position. And when I get an architect position, I will get a salary raise. Amazing, right? But it also can be super small. For example, if I finish this task, I will order pizza and play my favorite video game. That also works. This also, like this rewarding ourselves, remembering why we do it, why is it worth to stick to things, can hack our brain into getting a bit of dopamine at this point. And resources and the frustration that causes them. This is one that's actually pretty easy to communicate and actually pretty easy to solve, because resources can be anything that you lack to do your work. And it can be a piece of software to make your life easier. It can be a comfortable chair, but very often it's time. Time is also a resource. And time can be literally time, but also, for example, you need more people in your team to deliver a project. And that's why estimating tasks is super important and can be used as a communication tool in that matter. And on top of that, the estimation is pretty much the only communication form I could think of that doesn't include forming full sentences and speaking about emotion. So if you're not comfortable with that, use this instead. And estimates are great because they're understood by business very, very well. And they can take actions on them. If, for example, you estimate something to take X amount of time, the business can decide that, okay, it's a bit long, we need to change the scope of this project, it's not feasible this way. Or maybe we need to change our hiring plan and actually get more developers on board because we want to do big things and we need more hands. Or maybe they will even rethink the entire project because on a certain timeline doesn't make sense. And speaking about timelines, this happens very, very, very often. For business, estimates are very often deadlines. Because business operates on timelines, dates, datelines, deadlines, whatever that is a very accurate point of time when they can put a money number on top. This happens, we have to deal with that. And in order to understand why is it important, you can think about a very different situation when you're, for example, at the end, on the other end of such a similar situation. Because any IT project is not different from a non-IT project. For example, building a house of flats. Block of flats? Well, I don't know what I say. So yeah, you got an apartment for yourself. And you usually do that such an operation like a year ahead or like a few months ahead. Perhaps you need to sell your old place. Perhaps you need to hire a construction crew, maybe an architect, designer, whatever, you name it. Before this moment in time and that moving in date, you need to plan an entire timeline of things, people, projects that need to happen. And obviously, they also need to be planned in advance. So when your apartment is not ready at the time, multiple projects, multiple plans, and multiple people are involved. And the plans fall apart for all of them. This is the impact of not delivering on time. Obviously, life is life, and things almost never happen on time. But it's way better, even for you, buying that apartment, it would be way more convenient to know that instead of 4 months from now, you would get your apartment 7 months from now, but you would get it 7 months from now. That's why when you estimate things, add a lot of padding. Estimate something, double it, maybe triple it if needed. Make a number that's comfortable with you, for your team, for your skill set, for anything. It's way better to deliver things on time, even in 6 months from now, than over and over prolonging that date and making a lot of people and a lot of projects. And with more complexity, there's like more people and more projects involved that depend perhaps on that. So yeah, the last one. False start is not an emotion, but it's a situation that once you're in it, you probably know it. And you know it because you don't know. pretty much. You don't know how to start. And perhaps I will not surprise you again if I say again, speak up, ask questions, and talk with your teammates. I would encourage you not to hate all of the meetings. For meeting is absolutely necessary for building an action plan. Really sit down, get a focused time of like an hour or two of work, and build an action plan. And a good action plan defines your goal, lists all the necessary tasks, or at least an outline of tasks, identifies critical ones, and then there's like assignment of tasks, and then iterating over that plan. This is pretty much what happens or should happen during sprint planning, and then a daily is like an iteration of this action plan. But you don't necessarily have to stick to just your team action plan. You can build an action plan for yourself, and then it's also super, super handy. Again, I encourage you to do it with pen and paper, because it works way better for our brains. But especially if you have a larger feature to develop, and perhaps you're by yourself, or maybe just like with another person pairing up, do the action plan for this particular big thing that sounds a little scary, perhaps, at the moment. It might really help you. And I will make a small digression here. When I mean communication, when I say communication, when I say questions, I obviously don't mean anything like what Elmo says here. This is technically communication, but obviously not a very good one. And communication is a really, really large topic. There could be a separate talk about this, and again, it would be only on the surface. There are books, lectures, courses, you name it. It's a really, really vast area. But there are 3 tips that you can remember and start using in case you really don't know how to start and you would like to start speak up. First one is the I statements. So saying something like, they usually start with an I, because it's about me. I don't feel comfortable with this estimation, period. That's a very good form of communication. Then questions. Unless they're passive-aggressive, you really can't go with questions. Seriously, it's really hard to ruin a conversation with a question. So use that tool, ask questions. If you don't understand something, ask questions. Always, always, and always. And then the third one is quite big. It might need some more practice. But when you communicate, especially with business, but it works for everyone, focus on risks and perhaps even propose a solution. So it could go something like that. If we don't implement X now, there is a risk of losing data in the future. Person A is an expert in this matter, and he would need around a week to have it implemented. Done. Then business might have like some follow-up questions, but if you work with decent people, nobody would say like a hard no to you to that conversation. And the good thing is that it's not only about business and about what we do. These things about communication can be also used in our personal lives. Imagine such a situation. Your girlfriend wants you to go to a shopping mall again, doing shopping, look for clothes. Like, I don't know any single man who likes doing that, so this is a very good example. Instead of just like being defensive and saying you suck and everything is terrible, like Elmo, don't be Elmo, you can say something like, I am very tired, I feel very tired. Why do you need me there? What's my value there? Maybe you can go alone, and I will meet you there later at the movies, and we can go back home together. Probably any rational person wouldn't start a fight right after hearing such a thing. Perhaps. I don't put any guarantees on that. So, a TLDR version of all this. Emotional roller coaster when facing any type of change is absolutely normal. Business is business, we have to deal with it. By acknowledging and naming your emotional state, you can identify what's wrong and then fix it. And communicate, 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 always. There is not enough communication in this world. And in case everything falls apart, you really don't know what to do, everything is terrible, keep calm and carry on, because it's just a job.
On one of the last slides, there was this about focus on risks and solutions. And I just like realized that often that I give the review, I am using like, I am afraid that something will happen, which is basically the same, but I assume that saying there is a risk that something will happen is at least more professional, but maybe there are some other like, I don't know, phrases like avoid these 5 phrases when you're doing your code review or something like that.
So avoid, rule number 1, avoid assuming things that a person is a certain way. There is something, it's one of the most common psychological mistakes we do. When something happens to us, we attribute things to external circumstances. So I didn't deliver this thing because my cat was sick, I don't know, whatever, I didn't have this, and that. It's not my fault. It's because of something else. But when something else happens to your colleague and this person, for example, doesn't deliver on time and you depend on it, you probably would think things about that person instead of the situation that that person was in. So this probably would be my first note. I cannot think of like 5 things from the top of my head, but this would be I think this one really helps in life. And if you talk about your emotion, use the I statement. And then talk about risk in a separate part of a conversation. Because sometimes talking about emotion is important, but as you mentioned, it's not necessarily professional, at least not in all of the aspects of business.
Thanks. First of all, thank you for your talk, really nice talk. I have a question, because I really like this matrix equation, and I find it pretty useful. However, I have one concern, because it's sometimes really hard to identify the feelings, actually, how to distinguish, for example, anxiety from frustration and so on. I used to be an EM, and I had this problem because those emotions are pretty elusive. So you cannot actually identify it well on one-on-ones with your team. So maybe you have some hints how to do this and how to properly identify and distinguish those emotions.
This is again a really, really big question, but I can give you some hints. Emotions are not necessarily what we think and what's in our head, but very often we feel them in our bodies. So for example, anxiety is kind of like this nervousness over here. Anger is very often in our hands. Frustration is more like a belly area, for example. It's obviously like can differ person to person, but this can be like a first biological cue to kind of like, when you think about this project, what does it hurt? Like where? Where does it hurt? Is it your belly? Is it like you want to smash something, or you like feel like your heart is about to like, I don't know, explode, or kind of like here, this might be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Not really a question, but a thank you for you, because I feel like you, exactly the slide, what is frustration? I was thinking that for me, for example, this model that you presented would be helpful because it's a resource that I can use when I feel this way or that way. So thank you for reducing my future frustrations.
You're welcome. I'm glad I could help. Okay, thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.